So, hi, welcome back. Lovely to see you again. And as always, this is a great opportunity for me to share with you, but also for you to give me ideas as well in the chat. So, let's get started because we've got a very, very packed webinar today. Question for us is always about how to use the three pupils books and also how do we mainly work with books 2 and 3. Well, books 2 and 3 do progress on. We're going to have a sneaky peek at all of the books today. And basically, you'll have the opportunity to share with me some activities. So welcome to the webinar. And why Jolly Phonics? Well, Jolly Phonics is accredited by the Department of Education, and that means that it's gone through some very vigorous standards and also testing to be up there with the not that many phonics programs. To be able to say it's accredited is absolutely outstanding, and it is an outstanding program. But more than anything, if you're using it, you will recognize that it is a fast-paced program, meaning that children learn very quickly. But more than anything, the thing I love about the program, and I should imagine you do as well, is the adaptability. It's a program that we can suit to abilities and ages. It's not packed in a little box that you have to use it with certain ages. We can apply it where we need it. And more than anything, it is developed by teachers for teachers. So it's come from a place of experience and knowledge. We know what it's like in a classroom. And with the program growing with resources and materials, we definitely make sure that they work within your dynamic, and also that one resource can have a lot of different ways of using them. So Jolly Phonics has been around for a very long time, but what we realize is that the teaching environment changes, and also how children are using the resources globally. So in this webinar, we're going to dip into the Jolly Phonics Pupils books. And we're also going to have a little bit of an overview of how we can work with the activities and explore the contents in books 1, 2, and 3. But we've been listening to you. And so the focus of this webinar is going to be more books 2 and 3 and giving you a lot of ideas and takeaways for your lessons. But more than that, it's how it can also be used with your planning and how you want to use the books to support Jolly Classroom and also support children who may need additional help with struggling with concepts or things like that. So today we're going to look exclusively at why we are using the books. Now, the books are great, and I love this word scaffolding. We're building children's knowledge along. We have a great flight path. And as the children are starting with book 1, they're getting all those 5 skills in place where they're doing their handwriting, they're blending, and they're segmenting. But all that knowledge is coming together to a lesser or greater degree, depending on what your children need. Now, this is where the word adaptability comes in, because if your class is doing extremely well with maybe 4 of the 5 key skills and they need to practice more the 5th one, you can adapt the program to suit your class. You might be working with 3 or 4 different classes and they all may have different areas that need working on. And that's what I'm going to help you with today, to give you some ideas. Also, how to use the books for practice and consolidation. And they are a great support for Jolly Classroom. Let's not forget that this is a place where we can put all the children's work. We see their continuous progress, and you can evaluate and assess how they are moving along. So packed in these 3 little books, you've got everything really. It's just great. So let's have a look. So book 1 is where children start. And of course, if you are familiar with the program, we are looking at 42 sounds. And the first book gives us that time to cover those 42 sounds and also building skills. As children are building up their skills, what they also are learning by group 6 are the tricky words. And the good thing about book 1 is that they are indicated in the corner here. You can see in the corner we have the tricky words that are put in, which are a visual reminder for the children and also for the teacher as well. The good thing about book 1 and all of the books is that they are now color coded. If any of you remember before when they were all the same color, it was really quite hard to get the children to locate what section they needed to be in because they may not be secure with their numbers, more so if it's English as a second language. So at least now in the books, we have the blue, the green, the pink, the yellow sections where children can go to quite easy, trying to help them with autonomy using their workbooks. But also within the first book, you will see that we have arranged that your step-by-step lesson plans. So if you have the teacher's book, and I recommend you get the teacher's book because the teacher's book covers all the 3 pupils' books. If you have never used the program before, it has a brilliant introduction, and it also helps you understand the pace of delivery of each lesson. It'll give you a starter, it'll give you the core of the lesson and how to round off. As you become familiar with the books, you can then add more adaptability as you are using these resources with your children. And every year, children change, so it's great that we can have that flexibility. But also what you will find is that there is a range of resources to support. And we're not focusing on those today. We're mainly looking at the 3 pupils book and how we get started. So the first book, the Pupils Book, and as I mentioned, I'm not going to spend too much time on this book today because as you can see, it's quite straightforward. What we are doing is introducing the grapheme, and you will notice that we have it in the capital letter and the small letter. It's quite important to know about that because we're not introducing the alphabet yet. We're not even introducing capital letters yet. But what we are doing is drawing children's attention to that little box in the corner, which shows how that sound that they are learning, which is lowercase, can change and also be a big letter as well. And if you have the wall freeze, you'll notice that these letters are all embedded in the wall freeze. But these are great ways for children to get started with their handwriting skills and copying, and also understanding that the grapheme, meaning the letter shape, has a sound. You might have children who are not able to complete doing the handwriting or the copying. They may be very, very young, but many of you know that we have a multisensory approach to how we help children with their letter sound and letter shape correlation. And they could be doing sand letters, they could be touching letters that are plastic, and also finger tracking laminated sheets or putting plasticine on. There are many ways to support your children with their varying abilities. And also here is the beginning of the sound dots, which is indicating that one letter has one sound. And a bit further on, as you can see here, we understand that 2 letters, a digraph, has 2 letters making one sound and has 1 dot. But before we get to that stage, which is group 4, we're helping children build up their knowledge with the short vowel sounds before we move on to the long vowel sounds. But also you can see we're using different skills as well. We're revising, which is a constant thing within the books, excuse me, which is allowing children to build up that spiral of knowledge, but also going back to their first point of learning, which is incredibly powerful. And it's also a way that children are structuring or scaffolding that knowledge, which will help them move on to books 2 and 3. So very briefly, you can see here we have a puzzle, and here we're getting children to listen for the sounds. We've got sun, spider, snail, and tree. Well, here they've got a clue that the tree is not the right one because we've embedded a little cross there so children understand it's their first lesson. But then if we move on with the book, when we get to group 4, you will see that it's a slightly different skill. Children now have started blending or segmenting, and also we're using large dots here to help them put the right sound. So we have chain, so it'd be ch, a, n, 3 sound dots. So this is a brilliant way, and as the book progresses. But as I mentioned, I'm not going to spend too much time on book 1 because it's fairly easy to navigate, and more so if you have the Pupils book. So let's dive into book 2. And it would be very interesting to know in the chat how many of you are using the books, and if you have at this time of year probably got into book 2. So please let me know in the chat if you are using the books. And you're going to see firstly here a very typical page from book 2. And look what we have here. So we're going straight into revision mode. We're getting straight into children activating their knowledge and what they have learned. And this is a great place to do it. On this page, we have several activities. And the first ones that we're going to do are revise the tricky words. And the good thing about the tricky word is that they are all color coded. So there are 72 tricky words and they come in groups and they also have an associated color. So if you have a beautiful display up, children will immediately look for that and they know what color to go to. Be mindful that when you are doing the tricky words, you put them up progressively, because too much up at the same time would be overwhelming for children. Remember, they need to be looking at the sight display, the sight words, the tricky words, so that they can learn how to spell them and also become familiar with the sequence of letters in them. By this time, we would have started to help the children understand how to look for the tricky bit in the word. But for this activity, what I'm going to do is give them a context. Now, we've got the tricky words here, which are you and your. So I'm going to ask you to, in the chat box, to give me a sentence with you and your. What would you say to the children to give it a context? What would you say? Let's have a look. If any of you could give me a sentence with you or your, how would you give a context to your children? Can you take your coat off? That's a good one. Do you love your hen? That's tying into the next one. That's really good. Do you have a pencil? So that's brilliant that you are using the context. And also, if you can bring in the hen, that's great. We're kind of like connecting to the next activity that we have. So again, we have the write, we have the copy and cover and write and check. And this is quite an old and traditional method, but it's one that means children are zooming in and focused on what they need to do. So again, we're giving the opportunity for this to happen using the top part. But then we're asking the children to do something else within this activity. It's important that you, the teacher, are very clear on what we are asking the children to do. And also, what are your expectations? Because this is one of the first exposures children are going to have to be doing some free writing or constructed writing or modeled writing with you. Now you'll see here, I've added some color. Now, many of us love the idea of coloring in the class, but it could also consume a lot of your time within the class. So what I used to do with this activity was perhaps just get the children to color in certain things within the hen, maybe the beak or maybe the chick, just color one or two things within here. And this also is promoting listening skills as well. If they can follow that direction of, can you color the beak? And can you color the chick? You probably have to point these out, but getting them to use their comprehension and listening skills. I don't want to lose all my time in coloring this in now, because I'll have nothing left in my teaching hour to be able to do the writing. What are my expectations? Well, if this is the first writing that they're doing, probably one or two sentences might be what I would like to see. And that probably is going to be collaborative because it's the first time. And also, my expectations are that children would probably use very simple sentence structures that I would have to model. I would draw attention here to what the activity is about. It's about the hen. And I would also get the children to point out, what have we got here? I'm going to ask you in the chat, what's the first thing that they see in this red circle? It's a tricky word. And then we have a decodable CVC word. Yes. So I would point this out and also get the children to tell me how many sounds, or hold up their fingers and tell me how many sounds they could hear. So I'm actually warming the children up into the activity. Now we're looking at the activity now. We want to organize the thoughts. Now, children who may be struggling or find this kind of activity overwhelming, it might be good to use a couple of dots so that they know where to start and they know where to finish. You can change these where you think the child would be able to manage the activity. And more than anything, it's organizing thoughts and generating vocabulary. I want the children to talk about what they can see. Now, just imagine that you are 5-year-olds or 6-year-olds. We say, I can see. So what can you see? Pop it in the chat. What can you see in our little illustration there? So we've got a hen. We know it's a hen, but what else can you see? And how many chicks are there? And how many? I can see a big hen, chicks and eggs. I can see. Now, even in the chat, you are modeling the level of the child. I can see, I can see. And that is brilliant. That's what we want children to use. Very, very, very simple, uncomplicated sentences to get going. And we could start scribing the words that the children use. I'm going to put a glossary on my smartboard or my chalkboard of the words the children have given me. How empowering that is when the children can see the teacher is using the words that have been offered. But also, if I'm not confident myself, I could have a look at the word bank or the word book to make sure what words would fit with the level of this activity. So some of you have offered me these, which is I can see, there is, there are, and that is fine. That is perfect for this level. If the children have given you some words, you can start putting these together so that you are helping model a sentence and scribing it so that they have a model to follow. Remember, this is their first attempt at being able to do this, and giving them the structure, the model, and also the vocabulary to do so will make it an enjoyable one. We don't want them stressed, and equally, we don't want them in a panic mode because we're not going to get the results. Oracy, brilliant way. Get the children to say the sentences. Get the children to practice the sentences before they put them down. Again, having done that sets the children in the right place to carry on the task. Using these simple little techniques and strategies before you move on to any writing task means that you are reaching all the learners in your class that may be visual learners. They need to hear it, they need to see it, and they need to practice it before they get to this point. Just think of it yourself when you're going to write a letter. How many drafts do you do? Or an email? So for a child, we need to put them in the right place. So for some tips for an activity like this, which progresses on within the books, are think about your timing, think about what you're going to color, like the yellow chick, that would be great, or a red beak. Point out areas that they can color so you are not losing your time, and also how you're going to generate the vocabulary. We want the children to come forward with vocabulary, but also we have to be mindful of the vocabulary they offer, are letters that they have really, and that they can decode them and also read them. And also here we go, look at this. So I'm looking at what the children have given me, and it's a great opportunity for using my sound dots. I'm not going to do all the words because that would really consume all my time, but I'm picking ones that I know could be a little bit tricky. How many sounds in chick? How many sounds in egg? We've got double trouble, and we've also got two letters making one sound, and we've got k and k. So these are great words for me to use. So again, I'm doing my blending and segmenting, and I'm touching the 5 key skills. How brilliant is that before I move on? So as you can see, there's a lot you can build in and warm up before we do the actual activity. So this is a good thing here to think about, is when you actually get in here, is how long did the activity take? This is a good thing to think about for your planning, because as the children progress with more skills and more writing activities similar to this, you need to think about this for your planning. If this one took a long time, the skills will get better, but also what could you build in? I've given you a lot of activities to build in for this one, but maybe these are parts that you would not use with this activity, but move as we have progression. And how much support did you have to give? Also, the expectations. Did it meet your expectations of what the children managed to do? Are you recognizing that some children are not blending and segmenting as well as they can do? And also, children who finish the activity really quickly, what did I have in place for them so they're not disrupting my class? And for the next writing activity, what have the children learned? So I want to build on this. So with my first exposure to this type of activity, I'm going to make a lot of notes. I'm going to find out the children who struggled, the children who did it really quickly, and also children who are using all their skills. It takes time. And it won't happen overnight. But what I can do is facilitate the right environment to get reading and writing in place. And this is reading. What they write, they read. So remember that it's a double opportunity for us. Okay, moving on through book 2, we have the short vowels. And some of us know how children get confused. We have our vowel hand. We also have our songs. We have lots of practice. But what do I need to think of before I start? I've got to make sure that the children actually know the vowel sounds. And also, we've got an awful lot of words in here. How many words do they know? Again, thinking about my class, am I going to explain every single illustration on here? If I have children who have English as a second language, that might take up a lot of my time. But what I could do is select maybe 4 images to give them a context and also help children with comprehension. Many children might know some of these because some of these words are in the story, and also they I go with the letter sounds that we have. But also we're using dashes. Children probably have been using letter sounds and now we're using dashes. So we'd have to help them understand what the dashes mean. And they are filling the gaps, basically going along. And you can see we can progress where we have more and we have less. And it's pointing this out to children and also looking at what they need to do. So we have quite a few things happening here. But before I move on, I'm going to start here. What I would do is organize my smartboard or my blackboard with the short vowels. I'd also look at the words that are in the activity and organize them so that children are understanding where the vowels fit within those words. These are words that they have done before, and I can actually use 2 colors so it stands out. The short vowels can stand out. And I could say, can you give me the action? Can you give me the sound of the short vowel? I could here ask a child to come up and put a circle around the short vowel, or here I could put dots. So organizing thoughts, first of all, is connecting the content to previous learning. Also, using a combination of ways to do this means that the children are using different skills. You could vary it. You could ask the child to, let's say, circle, put a dash, put a dot, or even do the action or do the sound. And then I could quickly just do a little bit of blending and segmenting just to make sure that we are practicing all the 5 skills. This could be quite quick, but can you see how it actually helps children organize the thoughts before we move on? And also moving on, I would be getting the children to look for the short vowels, probably in the wall frieze, or I could have some letter tiles out so that they are making the connection. And for myself, I might be using the word book or the word bank to look at other words that would fit. Having these other resources around to support this activity means I'm addressing all these multisensory learners who may want to see it, they may want to feel it, they may want to hold it up. But also the vowel hand, that simple little hand that we make, is a powerful tool to support children with this. So as you can see, we've got the activity going with the visual cues to support the child, like you can see here, and then they're in the right place. And you'll hear me say that quite a bit. The child is in the right place for successful execution of doing this activity. So again, some tips there that I hope you find helpful. Magic E, we love Magic E, and Magic E can be one of those activities that can be time consuming. So what I'm going to say to you is, I want you to give me some Magic E words. I'm going to look in the chat. So let's go through the chat and see if any of you can give me some Magic E words. I'm going to look. Oh, look at that. Kite, cake, fight. Oh, wow, look at this. It's pouring in. This is absolutely amazing. So I don't have to ask you what you would do with this activity, but as you can see, actually doing this where we're getting children to look at, that's wonderful, to look at the words with and without the magic key is very powerful. You know, here, this is great that children are making the connection that this is all the same. In some phonics programs, they do them individually and move on, but here, being able to look at them all across the board here, the children are making the connection that when the first vowel does the walking, the second one does the talking. First vowel does the talking, and this, oh, I've got confused now. But what I am saying is that the first vowel is the loudest one, and then we have it moved along. So here we have like big, bike, Ross, rose, mull, mule, gat, gate. And a good way to do this is using your hands so that they can see the short vowel and the long vowel sounds. So you've been giving me some words, and also there's some great songs to support this. But if you are stuck, use your teacher's book because it's got it all in there, and the word bank and the word book. And also use that multi-sensory approach like cap, cape, hat, hate, cub, you. As you can see, I'm using my voice to over-exaggerate how to pronounce these words. Now, while you're doing this, slow down, modify, and let children hear how the short vowel becomes the long vowel. Practicing all of these is a great way for you to move on to the activity. And again, we may have some comprehension here. The good things about the visual cues here, it helps children understand what the word is with the magic E. So that's the connection you need to make, is that with the E, we can actually make sense of what the illustration is. And making sentences. And you don't have to be overcomplicated. You can have simple sentences like, Steve had a bike and went to the gate, and then he had cake. A silly sentence. Or, my cake is in the cube and I am 5. What I'm doing is using the vocabulary from the activity to make a sentence. Silly sentences, and you can say to the children, they are silly sentences. But more than anything, using props can really help children understand this concept. Again, lots of practice, lots of reinforcement, and we love the fact that the program can be adapted out to make your own resources that can be tied into recycling, and also even as simple as a magic key on a pencil can help children with some class-made resources that you can see here, or some little display that's on the wall where children are making their own short vowel, long vowel sounds, as you can see. We do reinforce this with our dictation sentences and also with the decodable readers. Children have a place with the decodable readers to be able to practice everything that they are doing in the books. So many of these ideas have come from you, the teachers, but more than anything, we like to hear about other things that you're using to support Magic E. Now, when we move on to the alternatives, we have to go back to the beginning to revise. You remember this one? This is group 4, the first sound where we have 2 letters making 1 sound. And children move on to the alternatives. Revise the original point. Remember at the beginning when I was saying it's a learning spiral, and children are constantly going back to that original point of learning. So here we're going back to that A sound before we move on to the alternative of the A using AY. This sounds pretty logical for us, but for children, they do need to go back so that they remember the sound, and also that sound can change with 2 new letters. That's a big concept, really, and it may take time for many children. You may need to have games, also visuals. We have the stories. Remember, the stories reinforce a lot of the alternatives as well as on Jolly Classroom. But what you can see here are children are filling the gap. But this isn't just a fill in the gap activity. We want them to blend and segment. We want them to read. We want them to use the visual cues. We want to hear the words in a context so that we are making it a complete sentence, but also that the children are making meaningful connections. And this is another way that can work with children are always looking for a code. They're looking for why does it work? What do I need to look for? And I've taken the words, as you can see, and using a different color, I'm making it very obvious where these fit. I remember a child saying to me, oh, does that mean that the A always has another letter after it? Well, generally, the AI has got letters around it. We can't say that's the rule for AY because we have words like crayon. It's not an English word, actually. But as you can see, just highlighting these words before doing my writing and getting the children to do the activity, we're making it really clear what the objective is and also how we have the same sound, but also we have a different way of spelling. And as we move on, you can see that we have the and I'm sure many of you, I'm going to say in the chat, how many of you have children who do get confused with this? Well, here I am. I'm organizing thought. And just like any child, having some organization helps them. And we have got a word in here. Have you spotted the word that's got two of them in it? I'm going to see if anyone notices in the chat box. Burger. Yeah, great. Burger. And as you see, I've kind of like made it a little bit different so it's a little bit obvious for the children. But again, what I have done here is help them organize some of their thought. I could actually just put the titles up and get them to come up and find the words and put them under the or which one is the right one. They're thinking, they're listening, and they're actually writing. I'm ticking all those boxes in what they need to do. And also this is a bit of a reverse skill because we're asking children to read and write. So again, it's what else could we do? And I'm going to shout out to you in the chat box and say, what else would you do with this activity? So we have the boxes, we have the words. What would we asking children to do? What would you be in your classroom asking them to do? Draw, exactly. We get them to draw. Now, comprehension comes into this as well. If you have English as a second language, we would need to explain what these are. And also, some of them are very familiar. A school uniform or what they're wearing to school. They may have a skirt and a shirt. A nurse, they might know. A purse, I might need to explain. And summer and winter, that might be in my topic. So they might be familiar with that. But the one good thing about them drawing, it helps me with my evaluation and understanding comprehension. Do they really know what the words are? But having the opportunity to draw helps consolidate that for many children. And also, we are looking at the skills that we are constantly reinforcing, which is blending and segmenting. And also we can put them into little sentences. You'll notice I always keep mentioning about sentences. Because if you just learn a word and not know where its place is in language, it's just something you can throw away. But if we can put it into a meaningful sentence, then children can make a connection. Do you like summer? Yes, I like summer. Once they have that idea, and also within your class dynamic, you are evaluating the children. Get children to talk to each other. Get them to talk to you. You know, if they do like summer, why do they like summer? And remember, children who have English as a second language will probably give you a combination of both languages, but that's great. It means that they are making an effort and they're contributing. Now, we have our revision, which is at the back of book 2. What skills are we using here? I'm asking you out there, what do you think you could use this page for? Because at the back of the books, we have these activities, and how would you use them? So I'm just looking at yeah, we're getting some answers now. Visuals, yes. We've got the visuals, and we also have got the opportunity for children to make the right choice. Spelling, brilliant, yeah. And we can also be doing blending and segmenting, comprehension, children making, it's called dual coding, where they're looking at the illustration and they have to find the word, they're making that association, write sentences, brilliant. And also we can link the vocab and the sentences together. And as you see at the bottom, everyone loves a word soup when they're doing the tricky words and they have to find this. This is a great skill of observation and where children are looking at the way that the word is constructed and the sequence of the letters in that to help them remember the tricky word. And you can use colors, as you can see here, or if you haven't got time for that, just go for the pencil. So yeah, the egg is in the nest. Great activity today. Thank you, chaps. You've been brilliant in supporting me with the webinar. And now we're going to move on to Pupil Book 3. I'm very aware of the time. And what does Pupil Book 3? Pupil Book 3 introduces us to more alternatives and tricky words and sentences. And as you can see, we're really progressing with all the skills now. Now, remember, it's not only about what is in the pupil's book, but also how you have delivered your lesson. You will have done the stories, you have done activities, and these are all building up to what we can consolidate using the pupil's book. It's a way of children making sense of everything they're learning with you and being able to demonstrate this. And again, as we can see here, the progression of the tricky words with any and many, that's quite a difficult concept, any and many. But then we have the opportunity for children to practice this by using the sentence that is available here. So I'm going to ask you, you're being really great at helping me out here. So have you got, is it any or many? Is it any or many? Now, let's see if any of you can help here. Is it any or yeah? And what's the next one? So if we've got any, the next one will be many. Thank you very much. And we've got somebody's asked about double letters and schwa. And if we have a bit of time, I'll go into that because that's really good that we have this. And I'm going to get Ollie to ask Ollie to make a note of these because these are other webinars that we can have where we can focus on teaching points. We call them sticky teaching points. So here we've got listen and write. Dictation, great opportunity with dictation. With dictation, children don't skip dictation. They get the opportunity for handwriting, doing capital letters, punctuation. They're using all those skills of blending and segmenting and how tricky words go together. These little opportunities for writing also are opportunities for reading because children will read what they write. So we are reinforcing these two skills doing the dictation. And also at the bottom, revising the tricky words. And these are great tricky words because they're question words. And I can deliver these in many ways by asking questions. These are words we are constantly using, and these are great words for children to be able to interact with. So this is quite a straightforward activity, and it actually builds up within book 3. But within book 3, we have some lovely activities, and I love this one. Now, think about this one. What skills are we using? Have a look at this activity. We've got numeracy as well as literacy, but what skills are we using? Have a look at this activity. Now just think, before I ask my children to do this, I'm going to check what is it they're going to learn from this. We've got drawing, that's one. Let's see if you can think of anything else. You know, there's a lot here that they have to do. Numbers, yeah. So that's another area. They've got to know their number. Adjectives, comprehension, thinking skill, lovely. So what we can see here is that the children have to read and they have to draw. Counting, preparing for sentence making, excellent. You're just perfect today, asking questions and drawing. That's lovely. And what you can see here at the bottom of this, I've put evaluation. Now, I have had a stab at doing this. I've cheated a bit. These have all come from the computer. But what you can see here is that I'm immediately checking how many fish are in this drawing. Just check how many fish are in this drawing. How many fish are in the drawing? Only 5. And what did it ask for? 6. Now, what I might say is, did that child just misread it? Or did that child not really understand what it was being asked to do? He or she may have thought they'd done 6. I might check and say, do you know, James, do you want to pop over and tell me how many fish have you got here? Read this, 6 fish. How many fish? And it might be, oh, I forgot one. Or the child really doesn't know. So it's helping me with my evaluation and also my comprehension for that child's activity. But also when we look here, what has been forgotten? When you look at this activity, what has the child forgotten? Now see if you can keenly have a look. What has the child forgotten? So we've got 5 fit. Oh, the man. Yes, well done. They've forgotten the man in the boat. Now, maybe they can't understand that sentence. You know, maybe they know boat because we've done O and we have the word boat, but maybe they don't know what the man is. So again, we are looking at possible scenarios here of asking children to read, listen, there's comprehension. I'm seeing it reflected in their drawing skills. And what I can see here is there might be some things missing, but is it comprehension because they don't know the word, or are they genuinely not being able to read this correctly? Yes, some children might draw, some children might draw a boat with another man in. We have to allow for that. So do you like this activity? It's a great activity for you to do over and over again. You can make your own template for that, but what you can see is that children are using a range of skills. And also we have very simple activities like this, words and sentences. In my class, I used to give the children yes and no cards because it was easy for them to kind of, I'd say, zip up and throw away the key and hold up your cards. I want you to be really quiet. And I'd get them to think about the card they were using. So I would say, the cat is sleeping. And they'd have to say yes or no using the cards. They'd have to let me know using the cards. I was developing their listening skills and also their thinking skills. So I would go through this activity asking them to use the yes or the no card. For some children, it was quite obvious. For other, they really have to use the visual cues. So allow for time, allow for getting it wrong, and even allow for children to help each other. That's perfect. But what we are doing is getting children using a different way to show their comprehension and also using their reading skills, comprehension skills, and we're going to extend it out. Because then I'd say to the children, put down your cards and say the sentence again. And I would say, the cat is sleeping. I'd reverse it into a question. Is the cat sleeping? And then get the children to answer, not yes or no, but a complete sentence. Yes, the cat is sleeping. Is it 3 o'clock? Yes, it is 3 o'clock. Are rabbits good at hopping? Yes, they are good at hopping. So as you can see, I'm getting children to use oracy where they are responding back to me in complete sentences, making them ready for further down the line for the writing skill. I might do some things wrong because I want them to put a no in. I could say, does the dragon have 5 eggs? No, the dragon has 10 eggs. So as you can see, we're building up the skill here. But if the children aren't at the level where they can respond in full sentences that you are modeling, try this activity with the yes and no cards. And you can also use this strategy with other activities within the book, but also even if you're doing blending and segmenting, where you want children to sit and listen and observe, getting them to say how many sounds. Can you hear 10 sounds? No. Can you hear 5 sounds? Yes. Just getting them to interact in a different way is highly appealing to a lot of children. And as you can see, great, I'm going to bring, all right, Ollie's keenly keeping on top of me, making sure that everything is all right. So as you can see here, another activity that I really love. Skills are moving along. Children are really making connections with how to use the page now. They are familiar with the structure of the pages. They are familiar with the visual cues that are supporting the vocabulary within the activity. I might explicitly point these things out to help children because sometimes there may be something they don't really understand. So we're talking about the images. I want to be sure that children really understand the images and the vocabulary to support that. And also, we're asking children to connect sentences. This is quite a skill, but they should be ready for this. If you are following through in books 1 and 2, we're bringing children to the end of this 42 sounds and also building reading and writing skills so they are capable of doing it. But also we want to vary how it is approached within the classroom. So model the activity. You might be saying, how do I do that? There's an awful lot in here. Let me just show you. So what you can do is have sentence strips where you have one side of the sentence and the other side. My advice here is to have the complete sentence. I can see a hen on the same color as her beak is yellow. So these parts will be self-correcting. If they are both on a pink piece of paper, the child can put those together. If the oak tree is tall, and what would it go with? Its leaves are green. I would have that on a green pieces of paper. Children are self-checking. This will help them organize their thoughts. The self-checking mechanism makes sure that they have comprehension, but also they have to sort. You could then move on to having these same sentences put on plain pieces of paper when they are more able to do the activity with more skills from having done the previous activity with colored pieces of paper. You can also use lolly sticks. I love the fact of lolly sticks because if you've gone to the effort of making this activity tactile, interactive, collaborative, then why not keep these resources? If you have fast finishers in the classroom, they can sit down and occupy themselves doing the activities. And also, it's a great way for children to start their reading. Decodable, these are decodable sentences. So they are reading while they're doing this activity. So again, it's looking at multisensory. Now, if we haven't got the book, we only have one story modeled in book 3, and that's Smoke Farm. Now, what if you don't have the book? You know, what else could I do with this activity? Now, I'm going to reach out to you in the chat to say, whoops, let me go back. What would you do if you didn't have the book? How would you manage this activity? Now, the one thing I would say is that it's fairly simple to flashcards. Yeah, you can use flashcards. That's great. It's fairly simple to follow the story. So if you have the book, that would be absolutely excellent to start the story on read through before we do the activity. But if you don't have the story, what I would suggest is that you follow the steps and model the story yourself first using the vocabulary so that children are not left guessing. They have heard you say it. And again, it's quite an easy one for us as adults to do. We're filling the gaps. We're giving children the story so that they have something to work with. I may, as someone suggested, put these onto flashcards where that their children are already reading with the words in place so that when they go to do the activity, there's nothing unfamiliar about it and there's nothing that they feel worried or upset about doing because maybe the sentence cards could be there on their table, or we're asking them to use a memory skill where they are using the right vocabulary to fit the slot. Again, it depends on the level of your children. But what you can see is this is decodable reading, also writing, a lot of skills here. Also, the children are using tricky words, capital letters. We've got full stops. It's more complicated than it looks, but for children having had decodable readers in their class and also being able to understand how the structures of sentences go together through the activities, they should be able to complete this quite easily. But what else could I do with this activity? I'm going to ask you, what else could I do with this activity? We could make it into a role play. We could also get change the animals. We could also give the animals names. We could keep adding to this to make it a little bit more fun. Now, I had this activity in my classroom and I was working with children who had English as second language. And what I did, I'm going to show you in this little video, is that I made little sentence strips, as you can see here. And this was actually during COVID, and I was showing the children. So we had these sentence strips, and you can see they're kind of the colors that are in the activity. I also would have gone through all of the vocabulary and picture cues so children had an idea of what was in the sentences. I would then cut all of the sentences up. Now, remember when I mentioned about children are self-checking, having all the sentences strips in different colors, they can now organize that the blue ones are together, the yellow ones are together, and the green ones are together. And then they have to sort out, does it make sense? And this is where they start using their comprehension and reading skills to be able to put it into some order and read through using the cues of the capital letters and the full stops. So they are putting that sentence together. It's been broken down and they're putting it back together. And maybe they have their pupils book next to them to help them do it. But also, I'm going to extend this activity. And as you can see here, I'm going to ask children to give me some adjectives, and I'm going to put those adjectives out so they can add them to the sentence. And you can see now the sun is hot has become the sun is very hot. You know, I sleep in a bed. It could be a small, big, or blue bed. You know, the red or paper boat is sailing. So although we're not explicitly doing adjectives, I'm making the sentence a little bit more interesting using all of the words that the children have given me. And as you can see, this could be a reusable activity and one again that children could work with in groups on their table, but I'm taking everything from this activity. And then even as I finish, I'm going to take the key vocabulary words and match them up with the illustrations so children are making that connection. There are so many things that I could do with this activity, but also the children are having fun. It's become a multi-sensory learning activity coming off the page and very enjoyable. And I would probably get children to work in groups. And as they get more proficient, I could use all of the sentences in book 3 to do this activity. I could use so many decodable sentences. I have my activities and games all ready for me from using what is provided in all of the books, but more so in book 2 and 3. Now, I hope you like that activity. And moving on, looking at how we're getting children, again, you can see we're in book 3, there's a lot of words and sentences, and here we're reversing the skill. How many of you, I'm going to ask in the chat, use storyboarding to help children organize their thoughts? Again, it's often time constraint. We're often having to work within very short periods of time. So this is a great activity that is in the book. And here, once the children have drawn it, it's a great idea that the children have a story to do about a party. Now, can you remember what sound has a party in the big books? Let's see if you know. Let's see if you know. In the big books, we have a great little activity, a great little story where the children are puffing on the pink cake. So we could go back to that and have a look. We can have a chat about having a party, what we do in the party, all the things we love in a party, and then get the children to start sequencing that storyline. Again, once they have the visual cues here, it's easier to write when you can see what you're writing about. And maybe some of the children may only progress to doing the 2 boxes. That's fine. It's good to have the 2 boxes done with some solid writing there. Even if they're short sentences, then make them struggle to do more. Also, this could be an activity you can go back to. But one of the things we're talking about it, we're using the visual cues from the big book and also then getting the children to use those skills for drawing to be able to move on. And as you can see here, we could move it on to a group activity. I love the fact we can have simple little A4 pieces of paper where children are just doing little storyboards. It could be cross-curricular. Think of all the words that we could bring in to talk about a party. And also, as I mentioned, the big book observation. What else could we bring? And using the big book actually has been hugely successful for this activity from my experience, because there's so many things that children forget, but once they've seen them, it's like, boom, yes, I remember the balloons and the cake and the hats and the presents and all the little bits and bobs that you can add. And more than anything, as we nearly finish now, I'm just winding up, yeah, is what questions do you have? And I know that I've right on the bottom of 4 o'clock, and it would be lovely to know that if you have any questions, you can share them now. That was a whistle-stop tour there.
Thank you, Yvonne. It's amazing. There's one question I think we should try and do, particularly is from Julia. I don't know if you can see that, but it's I have a question regarding the idea behind the Pupil Book. Was Pupil Book 1 written with the intention to be taught in grade 1, or rather in kindergarten, with a 3-year preschool program which leads to primary school, and we're trying to determine the appropriate time to begin Pupil Book 1.
Okay.
I think it could be easy beginning preschool free class where students are 5 turning 6 during the school year. Does someone working for Jolly Learning have any input on this?
Okay. Just before I answer that, somebody said the big book, the big finger phonic books. When I talk about the big book for the stories, the big finger phonics book for
I'll
the
put a link in the chat,
yeah,
2 seconds.
for the big. So regarding the Three Pupils books, the one thing we have found is that generally in the UK, the 3 books are done in 1 academic year, meaning that they can be per term or flexible to how quickly you get through your 42 sounds. But also there are countries that, or curriculums that spread them out, that 1 year they do the pupils book, and we've noticed that then they move on to books 2 and 3. It really does depend on your pace of teaching and also what goals you're trying to achieve with children at a certain age. Generally using the 3 books, it's a learning spiral, and I would consider that if you're going to match them to ages, we would say phase 1 would be using books 1 and 2 and 3 for an academic year in the UK. However, some places use book 1 for 4 to 5-year-olds and then books 2 and 3 for 5 to 6-year-olds. So again, because it's an ability-based program, we're looking at how it fits into your unique learning environment. We don't make it prescriptive with ages, if that makes sense. Did that answer the question?
I think so,
Julia,
yeah.
you're still
And
there?
Julia, if you've got any questions, feel free to email me at Ollie, O-L-L-Y, @jollylearning.com. Really happy to pick those up, and we're really happy to talk through individual cases in schools. We're always really open to
Yeah.
discussions.
And in the chat, I'm seeing that some people are saying that they use the books over different ages, and it works really well. So if you'd like to write in, we can give you more expansive, ideas on how to use the book. But this is the brilliance of the program, Ollie, that if I was working with really young learners with English as a second language, I would probably spend a bit more time on book 1 because all the skills are coming into place. And then having built that spiral of information, moving on to book 2 and 3 is fairly simple. And also, more than anything, remember that you have a really great guide with the teacher's book, and that helps you understand where am I starting and where am I finishing, because knowing the finishing point means you can work backwards and plan effectively for the children and the age range that you're working with. So always have a look at that to give you some idea of the scope and sequence of your planning. Teaching grammar, yes, I think our next one is going to be literacy so that you can see how we are moving on onto the next phase. But also, we have some giveaways, don't we, Ollie?
We do, we do, we do.
Yes. And we're giving away 5 sets of books 1, 2, and 3. And the one thing I'd like to ask you, if you remember, on the first writing activity that I shared with you, can you remember what it was about? The first writing activity in book 2, what was it about? Can you remember? Hen. Okay, there we go. We've got a few people there. Whoa! So the first 5 people else are whizzing through. Well done, well done. All the people there. It was amazing. Thank you very much. And I hope Ollie's got that.
I'm
Well,
screen grabbing it now, so I've got.
yeah, I bet. So we hope that you really enjoyed this session. Lots and lots of activities that can be done. And these are just my ideas. And the whole point of this is that you take these and you adapt them and you make them yours in your classroom. And we would love to know how you use these activities and what you do with them. And as always, it's a pleasure to meet you. And again, I've seen many people that I know on the webinar. So thank you very much. So thank you, wonderful people, for giving you an hour. And I hope you really enjoyed some of the strategies and the tips that you have there. And as always, it is an absolute pleasure to have you with us in our Jolly Hour. So thank you very much. Thank you.